Hello and welcome back to my channel. Happy Black History Month. Yeah, happy February. It is that time of year again. I'm uploading this hopefully still in February, otherwise, whatever. But it is that monthly time of book club, which is a series I do on my channel once a month where I literally read the books that I have in my room. Because if you are new to this channel, hello, name's Miracle, population me. I have over 24 books that I haven't touched in the last 2 years. They're collecting dust in my closet. So I'm slowly going back into my reading habits by reading a book a month and trying to keep that habit. And I'm taking you guys along for the journey because there is no other reason for me to read a book. Let's just be very clear. I have a phone and I love YouTube. So now that we got that settled, the book for this month is The Perfect Marriage. Now, as always, I keep my thoughts and I keep the summary separate because we'll be here for a very long time. And for this time, I'm trying my hardest to keep this video under an hour because I don't know what I'll be talking about in my last videos, but I be yapping too hard and I have to edit that. So that's very annoying. And also, I don't have the luxury to like just talk forever and then record, whatever. We're going to talk for like 45 minutes. And hopefully majority of that is my thoughts. So right here is the summary right now. Obviously spoilers. If you haven't read the book, go read it. I will spoil the entire thing. And there's a little cliffhanger at the very end if you stick around. So stick around for that. But I read The Perfect Marriage by Jennifer Rose, which I butchered like crazy, but don't worry about that. That's not the point. This is the summary portion, so buckle in. Basically, it's about Sarah Morgan, who is a high profile lawyer, and her husband Adam Morgan. I'm gonna call them husband and wife because I'm not saying full names in this channel anymore. I'm so tired. And the wife basically is a lawyer. She doesn't have to make time for her husband, but the husband's in their lake house that they own with this woman called Kelly Summers. Okay, remember that. She's very important. They've been cheating on her for a year and a half. Her husband been cheating on her with Kelly Summers. Okay, keeping up great. So one day, the wife was like, "Hey, let's have a baby with the husband," because they have not been very like together for a very long time. They've been there for a decade, but their love has really dwindled over the years. So that same night that the book takes place, they try for a baby, right? The next night, police comes over to their house and they're like, "Hey, your husband needs to get arrested. Kelly Summers is in your lake house and she is dead. The last person we know that was in your house is your husband." Now, the wife, no idea, no idea. But she chooses to represent her husband in court because she's a high profile criminal defense lawyer, right? Which means she has the nitty gritty experience to really push her husband out of prison. But she also doesn't think her husband killed the girl he was cheating on with, right? Now, a few things you gotta know. She is obviously upset that he cheated, and she does not want to be with him once this whole trial is over, but she does defend him because she does not believe that he actually killed her. Great. So she does the whole shebang. She goes to the crime scene, finds out that she was stabbed 37 times. There's scotch all over the place. The scotch has Ropival. I'm putting a spelling somewhere here. I definitely butchered that. It's considered a date grape drug, right? It was in her system, and she also has three. How do I say this YouTube wise? She has three pieces of evidence in her genital area, right? Which is her husband, wife husband, Kelly's original husband, Scott Summer, and a third person who is unknown for the majority of the story. So we assume that we know that she's cheating on her husband with the main husband of the story and not Scott Summer, who is her real husband. The third person, we have no idea. So, but the wife, she goes to the crime scene, tries to figure out what's going on. She goes to the police officer in a department to figure out what the evidence is. She represents her husband, try to get the real good deets about how they even met each other and what happened that led up to the murder. So, quick rundown. The husband met Kelly a year and a half ago. She works as a barista at some cafe. The same night they met, they literally had sex. It was actually that bad. Yeah. And then every other week, I guess, they meet up at the lake house that the wife never goes to because she's always busy. And they do what cheating couples do, right? And that whole time, the husband is telling the wife, like, "Oh, look into Kelly's husband, Scott. He's also a cop who happens to work at the exact same office, whatever." to make sure he is clear, because Kelly said something about someone being abusive to her and someone being really aggressive towards her and hitting her. Long story short, Scott is pretty much an abusive person. Maybe he did abuse Kelly because he does show up in the crime scene, beat the husband up before the wife and the other police officers pull him off because they think the husband actually killed Kelly. And long story short, he's clear of the murder of his own wife for some reason. Now, is it fully committed that he didn't kill her? He has an alibi, but the alibi is a whole nother cop. So it's very like they kind of brush over that several times, but they bring it up as if you think the other cop named Marcus is actually might be a fake alibi. But anyway, skipping some time, there is also this mom. This mom is Eleanor. She's a mom with a husband, and she coddles the absolute out of him. She is a helicopter parent, even though the husband is 34 years old, and the mom hates the wife. I don't know what is going on. Hates the wife. Blames her for not loving her husband enough to even get him out of cheating. Blames her for the quote unquote innocent, criminal case against her own son. Blames her for everything. Worst mom you ever seen. Whatever. She's always there, pitting and prodding, basically asking the wife to do her job. She doesn't have a real purpose in this book other than to be a mom and be really annoying, and you don't want to be her at all. But essentially, she has this assistant, the wife, named Anne, and Anne basically helps her get these cases, help get evidence from the police officer. She is the assistant for most of her cases that the wife does for the last 5 years. They work together, right? And Anne helps her get the evidence that they need for the husband in case he needs to go to trial, because apparently the trial is trying to push for the death penalty because, get this, Kelly was pregnant with the husband's, not her husband, Scott, but the wife's husband baby, 4 weeks pregnant. And no one knew except for Kelly, who never told anyone, right? So he's getting death penalty because in the state of Virginia, where they're at, he murdered Kelly and her unborn baby if he was the killer, right? So Sarah's upset, understandably so. Bye. I did forget to say the book does split into two POVs. So each chapter back and forth has the name Sarah Morgan, who is the wife I keep referring to, and Adam Morgan, who is the husband that I keep referring to. So each chapter you will see the POV or point of view of each person that is there, but only those two people because they're the main points, even though there are many characters. Back to it. Basically, she has this other person as well called Matthew. He's a lobbyist. He helped her with a lot of her cases as well. They know each other from college. So he's really equipped with his words, and he's there as emotional support for the most part. But he's a great person. Doesn't really add anything to the story until the very end. So I'm just going to give you the real big highlights of the book. One, they looked into Scott Summer. He doesn't really have much of a past because there's no proof that Kelly even announced that he's abusive. So he kind of gets away with whatever possibly happened. Two, the husband was under house arrest because he had a bail over $500,000 that the wife paid off. He goes into house arrest. He gets this reporter named Rebecca to help him out with his case because he doesn't believe his wife is doing much work because he knows she's upset and he doesn't believe she's actually helping him because he's a cheater. Why would we fully trust him? So he breaks out of house arrest, gets into Rebecca's car, goes to the police officer place where the wife Sarah is at and other people are at because he has a piece of evidence he wants to show. So he shows him this evidence, and it's the evidence of him and Kelly when they're still alive, but also doing what couples that are cheating do. And on the back of the picture, it has the words "end it or I will." And apparently, he found out that same picture with the handwriting is the same handwriting as the wife, assistant Sarah, Anne. Turns out, shocker, Anne knew about them cheating before Sarah, the wife, did, and she never told the wife at all because she wanted the husband to break it off way before this happened. And so when that happened, the husband who broke out of house arrest had to go straight to prison. Not prison, but jail, because he was off on bail, but he did something really stupid and then had to go into jail. It gets worse. That's why I'm laughing. But the wife finds out that Anne wasn't being forthcoming, found out that she actually knew more than she was letting on. her and this guy named Bob. Bob is another lawyer. He wants the case to be done with because it's hurting the firm, whatever. And he essentially finds out, the wife finds out that Bob is Kelly's not current husband, but she had an ex-husband who was murdered like years ago, right? Years ago, he was murdered. No one was ever tried for the case. At one point, Kelly was actually being like interviewed as a suspect, but her current husband Scott got her off because somehow, some way, he may disappear on technicality. Bob is the brother to Kelly's ex husband, and they were looking for him because they wanted to figure out if there was a connection between the murder between her ex husband and her. Long story short, even though he lied about who he was, because his name is supposed to be like Robert Miller or something, and his name was Bob, which is crazy. He was clear. And was also clear, she just didn't tell the wife about the cheating, but she said that it was meant to be a warning for the husband. So long story short, that went nowhere. Okay, he goes to jail. He stays in jail for like a hot minute. Scott Summers actually visits the husband like twice. The first time was to beat him up because he thought he killed Kelly. The second time was because he actually believed that he didn't do the murdering of Kelly, but he also had to prove to the husband, because you're not gonna see a guy you just beat up and ask him for help when you're a literal cop who's not supposed to be there. But he's asking the husband for forgiveness because he did beat his ass for like 2 whole seconds and made him bloody. But he helps him out. The husband tells Scott, like, go see Rebecca. She is my source. She's a reporter. She's all this and that. And then Scott leaves to go, I guess, quote, find him. Go find her. Long story short, he's not heard from again. He disappears. I don't know what happened. The book just kind of says he kind of went missing. He's supposed to be suspended with no pay for like fighting in house, But basically, the husband finds out no one's really doing anything for his case, is what he believes. Sarah, the entire time, is going back and forth the crime scene, the police officer, the lawyer, like the courthouse, to really find the evidence to prove that he doesn't deserve to die. And he's over here ruining the case, literally. Because at one point he escapes from the jail because I guess it was open because they had to like clear it out, or he was in like the public county jail, so the door was unlocked, or I don't know. I forgot. I literally don't remember how he got out. He gets out, he escapes, he goes straight to Rebecca's house. He doesn't know how to get there, so he takes like a car and then gets out because they realize he stole it, whatever. And he goes all the way to Rebecca's house, knocks on the door, is really confused onto why she's in a bath towel. If you think it's going a certain way after I said that, you're kind of right. They do kiss, but she had already called the police prior to him coming there because he kept knocking on her door. So he gets arrested again, and Sarah finds out, the wife. She finds out. She's more pissed off because she already had a case messed up because of him, since he literally broke out of prison the first time. So now he's like in jail, tied up, like literally handcuffs to the hands and his legs because he's literally twice broken out of prison and house arrest. So he's in jail, and she's realizing her case keeps falling apart because her husband is coming off as this really erratic person who keeps pushing the brim of what she's trying to do, because he's not acting innocent. He's acting like a guy who has something to hide. But essentially, she tells the husband, because he thinks Rebecca is still a reporter who was just getting information for him, because she was coming to the house before he escaped the second time when he was still back at the lake house. She literally was like giving him like information, like, oh, we can look into this, we can look into that, to figure out who can kill you, who could have killed Kelly, right? The wife told the husband, get this is kind of funny. The wife told the husband, Rebecca is not a reporter. She's a private detective. And Scott hired her to look into the case to make sure you were actually like innocent and not actually a killer. So the whole time, while the husband was thinking like Sarah, his wife, was not doing anything for his case as his lawyer, he was over here sabotaging it without truly knowing. So that really wasn't helping because Rebecca wasn't really actually his reporter friend. She was a private detective making sure that he wasn't doing anything wrong because, according to Sarah, Scott was the one who actually hired her to make sure he was staying in line and that all the information that she was getting from the husband was legit, because I guess Scott still believed he was guilty. Scott still isn't seen. We don't know where he is. He went missing after he talked to the husband for the last time when he was still in prison. But let's keep it moving. Okay. So at this point, there really isn't much of cases left, right? What they do know is that Kelly was stabbed 34 times, similarly to her husband from like a decade ago, right? She had a baby at 4 weeks old. She had a date grape drug inside of her, which was inside of the scotch that what she had, right? There isn't much evidence else. She had three sets of sperm inside of her, one being her current husband Scott, other being the main husband who cheated, third being an unknown person that no one could find, but they are testing people and no one was actually being tested. So at this point, the wife is fed up. The mom of the husband, dog shit. I'm can't sugarcoat it. She's a terrible human being. Not sure how the wife doesn't clock her. It's kind of crazy. But she does use Matthew. Matthew's a friend who's a lobbyist and went to school with her back in the day. She asked him for a favor to figure out who has the third DNA because they are still trying to figure it out because the next day is court. And this court will set up whether or not her husband goes to death penalty. Which is kind of crazy. Anyway, sorry. My thoughts came out a little too quick. Anyway, long story short, they do figure out who the third case of DNA is. The problem is she can't use it in court because let's just say Matthew didn't find it within legal means. I don't know what that means. I just know that he didn't do it legally. So they can't use it in court. And it doesn't help because they still know who killed Kelly. So they go to court and she does a great opening statement, which basically shows that her is very sympathetic to like Kelly, the person who is dead, but also showing very much remorse for the loss of her marriage because she's married to the person she's defending and yet has to deal with that and also defend him. So she does all of that in its opening statement. They don't show the rest of the trial. We can only assume they had more than one case because literally the next chapter was like deliberation for the jury and they chose like a verdict at this point. And you have to read the next chapter to figure out. Now, for some reason, they did a 11-year time skip. So you're having not knowing, you basically have a cliffhanger in one chapter. Next chapter is like damn near the epilogue, right? And there's only 64 chapters in a 300-page book. So 11 years later, you find out like not only is Adam still alive, Sarah's still alive, Adam and Sarah, wife and husband, or yeah, but unfortunately, he does get the guilty verdict, right? He has the guilty verdict. He actually was getting executed, but they take forever for execution these days. So 11 years go by, and he's just been waiting for his time to die. That's kind of crazy. But she goes to see him the day before he gets executed. She hasn't seen him in like 11 years because after the trial, it was just too much for her to try. And after they lost, it was like, I can only see you so many times before I feel depressed, and it just wasn't helping me. So she goes to see him. He's a mess, whatever, obviously. And she looks different because 11 years, whatever. And she basically doesn't show too much love, but does hold his hand to make him think like they're still in love. He actually never signed the divorce paper she sent, but it is what it is when you're literally on death row. So, long story short, she keeps talking to him as if she still has feelings for him the whole time. She only sees it for 10 minutes. She makes it seem like they still had a hopeful future if he wasn't like in this trope of killing Kelly 11 years ago. But when she leaves, she say like, "Oh, I actually never loved you. Like after this whole time, I wish you kind of like did die." Something similar. And he starts to realize something as he's getting inserted at the little the injections. Oh, why did she say that? Like that's very weird. She acted very romantic to me, but now she's acting like this whole other person. And he starts to realize something, but it's too late for him to really get that thought to like someone else. I'll tell you about it a little bit later because it shows up a lot when she says it. But essentially, she goes to sit down behind the glass where you can see like him getting injected with the mom who's like in her 70s. And the mom still don't like her, but she's seen her only son die. So she's literally like sitting next to the mom. The mom is just saying like she's just saying hi, nothing, no emotions, whatever. And Sarah, the wife, is still playing up to be like sympathetic because it's her son. You may hate the mom. You should hate the mom. I'm not gonna lie to you. You really should hate this mom. But this is her only son. Once he is executed after like, I don't know, 30 minutes, the mom looks at Sarah and says, "I'm sorry for everything." And then Sarah looks at her as she's about to leave because she doesn't really have a reason to stay. And she's like, "I'm not sorry." And then she walks away. And the mom is just sitting there crying, which before you even realize the real truth of the story, which there is real truth, you think it's worth it because it's like the mom was really shitty. She's not a good parent. And to be fair, the husband was not a good spouse because he lets his mom rule over the wife, which is really bad. But essentially, at this point, she goes outside of the execution place. She goes into a car. And in this car, she's married, right? She got married to someone new, and it's Bob, the same Bob who was the lawyer from 11 years ago, who was kind of a tight ass, to be honest, in the story. But she's with Bob now, and they have an 8 year old, or no, it's this 8 year old kid named Summer. And you're like, oh, I know you got remarried, but with Bob, I mean, I guess 11 years can do a lot. But here is the kicker. Here's the kicker. You know how I said there was a third piece of evidence and inside Kelly, and they figured it out, but she couldn't use it to prove that they killed Kelly. So you realize the third piece of evidence inside of her was the sheriff. So the sheriff has been helping Kelly, no, helping the wife throughout the entire story get evidence, but he's also been very sloppy with his work because small town where Kelly was murdered, whatever, right? So he's been helpful in some regards, but for the most part, he's been very like, don't blame Scott, he's a cop attitude. Turns out he was also having sex with Kelly, who is Scott's wife. So, but that didn't really go anywhere because obviously he didn't kill her. He just didn't want to test the third DNA because obviously it was his. But here is the true kicker. So when we said that they didn't figure out who actually killed Kelly and the husband took the blame for it, she kind of tells you a little secret. So they all started, let's go right back when she was a child. This will be quick, I promise. When she was a kid, she grew up in a pretty bad environment. Her dad, her mom were a lovely, lovely couple. They treated each other lovely. They were like a fairy tale story if Disney doesn't kill off the parents in every movie, right? After the dad died of cancer, the mom went into depression mode, didn't take care of herself, definitely did not care of Sarah. And after a while, she did heroin. Now, if you don't have a job and you're depressed, you got to pay for that somehow. So she prostituted herself a lot within the house that her and Sarah lived in. And after a while, they got evicted multiple times, living in motels, shelters, whatever happened. And Sarah at this point was like 12 years old. Now, at this point, she was going to school, working 40 hours, trying to make money for herself. Her mom would take it, use it for drugs, prostitute herself. Within the same house, a child was living, which made it seem as if they could have had done something to Sarah, basically. One day, her mom dies, right? Heroin overdose in the house. And it seems as if, oh, typical story for an addict, but there's 4 syringes in her instead of 1. You find out at this point that Sarah actually put in 3 other syringes into her mom after she had passed out from taking 1 syringe of heroin. So she actually killed her mom when she was a kid because she knew the addiction was only going down one direction, and she was still like not even 18 at this point, but an addict story is an addict story. And at this point, she didn't want to be laid down with someone who wasn't going to take care of her because she wasn't. She was taking care of herself at like 15. Now, fast forward to the future, present time, well, past. So she knew about Kelly and her husband being together since Bob told her about it like months prior to it being found out through the worst way possible. Bob actually told Sarah a long time ago because he wanted to embarrass her with the information so that she can quit her job because she was the best attorney of that firm and he wanted her spot, whatever. She devised a new plan and told him, in probably more words than I'm telling you, that they should actually kill Kelly and frame her husband for the murder because, as I said before, Bob is the brother of Kelly's ex-husband who was murdered and people still believe may have been murdered by Kelly, right? Okay. So somehow they got Bob to say yes and they devised a plan for the next few months to literally have evidence spewed that made people look somewhat guilty. So the picture that Anne took, she knew about it. She knew that she even wrote the little letter on like little words ended or else on the back. She didn't say anything because it wasn't like she didn't want to say it, but she also was waiting for Anne to talk, which she never did. The whole affair that her husband was having, she did that on purpose because she knew her husband was not being faithful and also just wanted to know how long he could keep going before something bad happens. But basically, when it got time for the murder to happen, the day that she went out with Anne was the day that Kelly was murdered. But her and Anne went to a bar. Anne can't hold her alcohol. She passed out in the bar. Sarah went to the lake house where she knew they were at, legit put the date rape drug in the scotch, so they both had it in their system, both knocked out, unconscious, whatever. And she stabbed Kelly 34 times, cleaned up evidence that proved that she was there, left, went home. Guess she told Anne goodnight or something. And then the next day, the police came and arrested her husband because he was the last one to see her, like logically, whatever. But apparently, her husband also had the date rape drug in his system, which, if the sheriff had actually tested his blood, he would have legit have been cleared of murder the same day, because you can't both be having that in your system and then one of you guys kill the other person. But that's literally the biggest like loophole that I could have seen that would have broken this entire case apart. That the fact that she killed Kelly because she wanted to take revenge on her husband for being a cheater, while also helping out Bob, who didn't think Kelly was actually innocent of her ex-husband and his brother's death. So they advised this whole plan of it, and that's essentially what happened. The reason she gave for doing all this is because she doesn't want to have a man ruin her life, like her. Her mom ruined her life because the dad was dead. Her husband was going to ruin her life because if he had stayed alive and they got divorced, he would take half of her money because he wasn't making money at all as a writer. He did, but then he didn't. And she didn't want to like give up something because of him. So that is literally the whole story. She killed Kelly, and she did it with Bob. She probably stabbed and did the cleanup herself, and then Bob just left the evidence to go every which way so they wouldn't fall on them. And then legit had a kid 11 years later, and now they're together, and they're now they're married. And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of cute because I do like a good romantic story in a book. But that is literally the whole synopsis. That is literally the whole synopsis in a 300 page book. So let's go into my thoughts. First off, I would say the last two chapters were kind of plateaued in my emotions. And let me explain. Because after you realize the highs and lows of what was going on, it was like every new development of a story that was occurring, you're like, oh my God, her husband's a cheater. He's been doing it for over a year and a half. Her assistant knew and didn't tell anyone. Bob is the ex-husband's like brother. The sheriffs may have a thing for the lawyer wife. It was just like 20 million things happening at the same time. And you're over here like, oh, I see this from Sarah's point of view, the wife. I see things from the husband's point of view, Adam. And it's like, okay, I know their thoughts, I know their emotions, I know what they're going through because it's their book, it's their story, right? But then when the last chapter comes in, it's like, oh, she killed him. And this is why she did it. And this is like how she did it. And this is how she got away with it. It's still in her perspective, right? And at first I was like, do your shit. I don't care that you killed. Like basically, because she killed Kelly, she set Adam up, her husband, to be executed because whether or not she knew that she was pregnant, I have no idea. But she did just set him up to go to jail, essentially. Now, I felt very plateaued. I had no extra emotions for this entire, like after the last two chapters, I was like, I have no new emotions. I can't feel hooray, she did her boss way, or oh my gosh, she shouldn't have killed him, killed her, and then sent her husband off to be executed. Because in my mind, I was like, it was so many highs and so many lows of a climax. It was like once you realize she did a murder, I was like, oh, I guess. We didn't know who else could do it. But the problem with that feeling that I was feeling is that it wasn't unjustified. Obviously, my emotions, right? But I went on Reddit because I was looking into if there was a movie, and there's not a movie. There is one that was supposed to be like produced in like 2022, never happened. But people were saying there are some loopholes or some things they never talked about in the book that ended up being unresolved at the end. For one, Kelly actually kept saying to the husband when she was alive and they were cheating on each other, hey, my husband is very abusive. He hits me, da da da. Scott, later on, who ended up never being seen in the book again, he went on to be like, I never hit her. I legit never hit her. Now, whether or not you believe him is anyone's business, but if he didn't hit her, we don't know who did hit her. That's number one. Number two, the deputy that was supposedly Scott's alibi the day that she was murdered, Marcus, he was only talked to like several times in the book, but he was never interrogated. The lawyer lady, Sarah, never talked to him. He was at the courthouse, but we never got to see what they asked him. So it came off as like we never cleared him of his like potential guilt that he had. Right. And it was very weird because you just kept hearing his name. You're like, oh, we should test him because the alibi could be a lie. And they could have both killed Kelly, which, obviously they didn't. But it was like, what abuse did she go through for the book to just drop the ball the moment we realized it was Kelly? Well, Kelly was murdered by Sarah. It was weird. And third, I saw this on Reddit, so I don't really claim this as my feelings, but I do agree with the statement. Essentially, the entire book, you see it through only Sarah and Adam. Adam, he's dead, whatever, sad. But Sarah, you see her emotions. You literally hear how much she's upset with Adam every time he escapes, every time he ruins the case, every time he makes it harder for her to find evidence to prove his so-called innocence, which he is, but. But yet, at the end of the book, you realize that she planned all this so that he can go to jail for the thing that she did. So it came off as like, why did we know from the jump that she was feeling upset that she couldn't do her job correctly of making sure he was innocent? But yet, it was almost like you shouldn't have even had to try very hard because your husband was making it easy for you to let him just go to jail and have the death penalty, and you wouldn't even have to try. If gave off like they were going a certain way and then they switched it off and let's say, oh, let's have Sarah kill her, it makes sense. But it's like you had her be upset because she couldn't do her job in making sure he was innocent many, many times, and yet somehow we're supposed to believe that she was faked emotions that she had when no one was in the room, in her house, outside, in her office. I don't know how many places have cameras or if she's a very good actress, but I don't just believe that just because she killed Kelly, she didn't really want to get her husband off of a death penalty, right? Like a death penalty. I'm thinking life in prison would make more sense because, hey, cheaters are cheaters are cheaters, but I don't think you should be murdered for it, right? Especially since she was doing all this because he was a cheater. So, yeah. So how I feel about each character. Sarah, I like Sarah. Sarah's a great like she's really good at her job, obviously, as a lawyer, right? The ending of her killing Kelly, I think, fell flat for me. I think that's the feeling I said plateau, which is basically flat. I don't really think she did the best at like portraying her true emotions of like how she was just faking everything. Like the whole time she was planning her murder because of what they were doing together. And it came off as like, if you knew all this, I shouldn't have to even go through your emotions. It made half the book feel irrelevant because every time we knew how upset she was, how much she was trying her best, how she came off as perfect because she had to be for the case with her husband. And it was like, you could have just faked that. You could have just come off and been like less upset. You could have just been like, oh, I knew this was going to happen because I see the future and I'm like meticulous like that. But it came off as being like, you actually really did care until we figured out the truth. And then it was like, then why did I have to know that you were upset at the mom for babying her son when you definitely knew that was going to occur because the mom has never changed and you never liked her? Why did I have to know that you were surprised at Anne for having the picture and even thought that way in your own house alone when you knew this entire time she knew and she didn't tell you? Like, what's the point of me knowing your emotions if you were just going to sidestep it for the book and then just come off and be like, oh, I knew everything. I planned it, obviously. And it didn't feel like you were acting to act because when did you have acting skills? Oh my God. I had this other thought that Reddit had first. So I'm claiming Reddit had it first, but I do agree. Someone said they should have had told us that she murdered Kelly at the very beginning and then gone through the process of her trying to like act like she didn't do it and still defend her husband to the best of her abilities and then come off still with the same result. But this time you wouldn't be bamboozled by the story. And I kind of agree because I treated it as if we were also not suspects, but because we didn't actually know how she felt about the whole case truly, and the fact that she killed Kelly, it does give off like we felt like you were treating us like suspects as well, even though we're just the readers. And the book had a lot of highs and a lot of lows in terms of what the heck they were going through. Like everyone was having secrets in this town. It was so crazy. Even Rebecca, the girl who was a private detective that I said was like hired by Scott, no. She was originally hired by Sarah, who actually used Bob to hire her, and her job was to make sure that her husband was going off the trail. So Rebecca would go to the husband when he was still in the lake house, originally in the lake house before he broke house arrest, and would give him false information every single time so that he would think he was helping, but also giving her false information so that he would force himself to do something like break out of the lake house, break his home like house address, literally break out of prison, which no one told him to do that. But hey, listen, I don't know what this man, he was on death penalty, okay? I don't know what to tell you. Her job was to literally make sure that he did not want to just sit there and wait. To be fair, he didn't trust Sarah. He did not trust Sarah, even though she was doing her best, which is now incorrect. She wasn't purposely, which is crazy because the way you read it, it was her best. I don't know what's going on. But he didn't know until he was about to die that Sarah actually knew everything and she pushed his death, that he was going to die. So it's like, you can't really stop anything. But that's what I'm saying, right? Rebecca was bought and never told anyone, but obviously she skipped town because she can't be there. But also, how do you hire a private investigator to lie? I don't get, like, just hire an actress and then say you're just gonna do this. Like, why? There's too many loopholes that I feel like it really wasn't like answered, but it doesn't ruin the story. I feel like if this was a good movie, like actually based on the book and not like someone else created freedom, I feel like this kind of book would go off really well, and you would miss some parts that weren't completely like done well in the book, right? Like if you read this book, you're like, there's so many missing pieces, so many pieces of the puzzle. They won't realize if one or two pieces don't make it to the puzzle. You just see it, and you're like, oh, this looks pretty good, but you look at the bottom, and you're like, there's pieces missing, and you're just like, this is like 100-piece puzzle. I don't have time to look for two other pieces, right? That's almost what it felt like. Like Reddit had a field day because they were like, it wasn't very good because there's parts that didn't make sense, and her being a killer while also trying her very best to get him off death row made no sense. But to me, it's like at this point, you knew everything you need to know about the story, about the people, about the intricacies of the law system. Like I wasn't trying to figure out where Scott went, where the Marcus. I don't care. I do not care. Honestly, I didn't even mind if she killed Kelly or that she made her husband go to death row because the story you are put through. I'm not saying he deserved death. He does not, but maybe he deserved to be in prison just because of cheating. But that's just my own fantasy opinion. But I do think it was a good book. I do like this book a lot. I give it honestly an 8 out of 10. The 2 points off is literally because of the loopholes that I was like, that makes sense why I feel like it was a plateau for the last 2 chapters. That is literally the entire book and my thoughts. And it's honestly a pretty good book. It was came out in 2020. And if you remember from the beginning of this video, I said a little cliffhanger that I wanted to share you guys. So I found it out today, literally today, as I was looking up if there was a movie for this book. There's supposed to be a movie, never happened. I'm not sure if it will. But essentially, there is a sequel. There is a sequel to this book coming out in literally 2 months. And what month is this? February. Coming out in April 25th, right? So, like, basically a sequel to this book coming out in April 25th of this year. And it is literally called The Perfect Divorce. And I cannot, when I tell you I'm flabbergasted that this book is even coming out pretty close to where I am like, I read this book, right? But essentially, real quick synopsis, because I did look it up because I was like, I want to make sure it sounds good. It does continue from this book, which is usually not what I find in a lot of book series, but this one is so different. Essentially, she's with Bob. She has a kid named Summer. That's how the book ends. They're together. She has a job that's different. We don't know what job is yet. In the book, The Perfect Divorce, apparently Bob cheats on her. Listen, I don't know if she's going to murder him again, but listen, 2 times is crazy. But he cheats on her. They go for a divorce. Apparently, Deputy Marcus, who doesn't get actually tested in the perfect marriage book, he comes back into whatever town they're in, and he tries to figure out the truth about what happened to Kelly because he's like, too many things are not lined up for this to occur because no one did not do their job when it came time to test Kelly and Adam and all these other people. And now they're dead, and yet we don't know where Scott is. We don't know anyone else. So now the truth is going to be unraveling in that next book. And honestly, I'm excited. I was so excited when I heard because I was like, I can't believe there's a sequel and I'm actually going to be able to read it, hopefully, if I find a copy. But I'm really hoping it comes out. I hope it answers some of the questions that were in this book because they weren't big. It does not make the story lesser than, in my opinion. I said 8 out of 10, obviously. I love it. I really do love it. And when it comes out, hopefully I can read it. And hopefully I can make an update video legit about that book. We hope, right? We can only hope. If not, I have like 22 other books to read and they're all gonna be really boring. But anyway, that is all I have for you guys today. The time on the clock is like 45 plus minutes, whatever. But it's not an hour, so I can cut around. And that is all I have for you today. This is a really good book. I really did enjoy it. I took forever to read it because, of course, I would. But if I had sat down in a library for like 3 hours, I can knock it out of the park. It was like 300 pages. But I enjoyed it. 8 out of 10. Would love to read the sequel. Would love to be there at the signing. But I'm not sure where this person lives. But anyway, I'll talk to you guys again. Happy Black History Month. I will see you guys literally in March. So, bye-bye. Talk to you guys soon.